Hollow Knight Silksong is the story of two individuals whose fates are tied together, one burdened to protect, the other spun to break. This video will tell the story of Silksong through the eyes of Hornet and Lace. Major spoilers for both Hollow Knight games ahead. To understand Hornet's story, we need to know the history of her ancestors. That story begins a long time ago in the land of Farloom. Originally a lush land filled with a variety of different bug cultures, the land of Farloom soon became ruled by the god Grandmother Silk, a being who could spin life itself from the threads of her soul. She used her power to create a system of control where she was worshipped by the bugs, who also served as slave labor for her needs. The Grandmother used her power to create the Weavers, spider-like beings with the ability to spin silk from their soul, similar to the Grandmother herself. The Weavers believed themselves to be divine, but they soon discovered that they were actually created when the Grandmother infused a common spider farlet with silk. They also found out that their silk connection to the Grandmother left them more under her control than they had originally thought. They ended up rebelling. After many failed attempts, the Weavers succeeded in trapping the Grandmother in a prison that was made by machinery and powered by the devout faith of pilgrims and slaves. This put the Grandmother in a state of slumber, but she was still powerful enough to reach out and influence the land. Her haunted silk possessed bugs, turning them into mindless automatons who worshipped her with full devotion, attacked her enemies on sight, and continued to perform their basic labor. This was called the Haunting. And so the Weavers fled, going to different parts of the world. They left the bugs of Farloom to unknowingly maintain the Grandmother's prison for generations. A group of these Weavers settled in the land of Hollow Nest, where they led an aggressive and isolationist lifestyle. They were led by Hera, the Beast. This was the realm of Deep Nest from the original Hollow Knight game. Above Deep Nest, Hollow Nest was flourishing. A godlike worm known as the Pale King had come to the land, shedding his ancient form and using his power to bring sapience to the bugs that lived there. The Pale King was connected with and could control to some degree the Void. His offspring would share this connection, at least in part. Together with his queen, the White Lady, they ruled for generations. There was another power that was worshipped in the Hollow Nest, the Radiance, a being that stood in opposition to the Void. As the Pale King's rule grew, memory of the Radiance faded. In response to this, the Radiance reached out into the dreams of bugs. This created an infection that spread throughout the minds of the bugs and the land. To stop this, the Pale King conceived a plan. He would create vessels, children made by him and the White Lady, combined with the Void, and use one of those vessels to contain her. This was the Hollow Knight. But to bind the Radiance fully, he would also need 3 dreamers, powerful bugs who would sleep eternally, holding the chains of her prison in place. He went to Hera the Beast, leader of the Deep Nest Weavers, and asked her to become one of those dreamers. In return, Hera asked that the Pale King give her a child. The Pale King agreed, and Hornet was born. Half weaver, half worm, a child descended from 2 gods. The bugs of Hollow Nest knew that Hornet was special, and many of them put their expectations on her right away as soon as she was born. The Weavers of Deep Nest taught her to spin silk, but they also whispered that she should be their queen, their savior. The White Lady seems to have been similarly harsh on Hornet, demanding excellence from her. They looked to Hornet to be their savior, either from the Void or the Grandmother herself. Hornet's mother Hera was different. She wished Hornet to follow her own path, to ignore the desires and machinations of the other bugs. But in the end, Hornet barely knew her mother. Soon after she was born, Hera went into her eternal sleep to contain the Radiance. For a time, Hornet trained under Hive Queen Vespa. The queen would give Hornet the weapon that would define her, a needle made of hive steel. Under the queen's tutelage, Hornet learned precision, patience, and became the warrior that she is today. When the Radiance began to break free from its prison, the infection returned. At this point, the Pale King and the White Palace were gone. The White Lady had secluded herself in her gardens, and the infection was spreading throughout the whole land. Hornet had become Hollow Nest's lone sentinel. She patrolled the caves and hallways, fighting for the bugs, but she did not have the power to save them. And then a knight came to the land. At first, Hornet saw this knight as just another void-corrupted vessel who would bring pain to the Hollow Nest. But she watched his actions from afar. She tested him in battle, and then she came to believe that he could be the one who could truly save Hollow Nest. so she helped him, guiding him to the abyss where he could unlock his true power and helping him in the final battle against the Radiants. The knight succeeded and Hollow Nest was saved, but Hornet could not rest for long. Soon her mother's past would come calling. Meanwhile, in Farloom, the grandmother Silk was pushing against the boundaries of her cage. At some point, and time is very vague and ambiguous in the world of Hollow Knight, the grandmother created life directly from Silk. There were the Weavers, of course, but there were also two others. The first was the Phantom, a lonely creature tasked with playing the exhaust organ in the Citadel, which would expel the Citadel's waste into the lands of Farloom. The other being was Lace, and she was made entirely of silk and crafted in the image of a child, the grandmother's attempt to make a daughter. Both sisters felt betrayed by the grandmother and the life she made them. Lace's body took an unimaginable amount of silk to create. The end result was fragile, her form unstable, and the power she had was never strong enough to rescue her mother from the cage that she was in. Lace was bitter and angry about her fate. The caretaker tells us that Lace patrolled the Citadel for generations, that she is one of the oldest bugs still around, a soul in a broken body that can never age, left alone in a land haunted by her mother for countless years. She would take her anger out on the bugs of the Citadel, killing many who crossed her path. From her cage in the cradle, the grandmother did not stop trying to escape. Using her influence, she pushed the choir, her religious warriors, to find the descendants of the Weavers who had betrayed her, capture them, and bring them back to Farloom. You could see the cages and read the stories of these captured Weavers in a room near the cradle in the Citadel. The implication is that she was trying to use these Weavers to help her escape her cage. The choir traveled to Hollow Nest, finding and capturing Hornet, the last Weaver, and bound her in a rune cage. They brought her to Farloom. On the way, a silk fly touched the cage and the runes broke, allowing Hornet to escape. Now, some players believe this was actually Lace's doing, because we see her with the ability to control these flies later on. And perhaps she does this to finally break the endless torment she's in. But we also know that these flies are likely the last remnants of bugs that were tortured in the Citadel's White Ward. So I also wonder if this was just a tortured soul that saw hope for a moment. Now in Farloom, Hornet begins to search for the person responsible for her kidnapping. Early on, when traveling through the deep docks, she, and the player, meet Lace for the first time. On a quick glance, Lace looks innocent, gently conducting the silk flies, but she turns aggressive as soon as she sees Hornet. She sings like a creepy kid in a horror movie. She talks and acts like a spoiled child who's watched a lot of anime. It's all condescension and irritating giggles with her. Hornet is nonplussed as they battle. When Hornet gets the upper hand, Lace runs for it. As Hornet journeys throughout the lands of Farloom, she discovers that she has a unique ability. She is able to bind the spirit of other bugs with hers, granting herself different crests or souls or essences that she could use to change how she interacts with the world. Every other bug has one. No other bug has this ability. The Weaver creation Ava, hidden deep in Weave Nest Atla, marvels at this ability and helps her to improve it. We learn a lot about who Hornet is through her interactions with the many bugs she meets and through her entries in the Hunter's Journal. She is consistently respectful of those she speaks with, even when they lash out at her. She has patience, but it's not unlimited. In her Hunter's Journal, we hear the respect she has for the clever different ways that bugs hide themselves or fight. We read that she dreamed of flying as a child, and we read that she's upset that the wonderfully big and fluffy winged firm is so aggressive, because she can't get in there and get a good cuddle. Mostly, though, we learn that Hornet is very aware of the violent and aggressive nature of her ancestors, and that she is trying to break that pattern. In her journey, she faces this violent history head-on, learning that she is a descendant of the grandmother, that the Weavers were the grandmother's children, and the trap that they used to capture the grandmother is reliant on the enslavement and abuse of Farloom's bugs. She vows to fight until the land is free, or she could fight no more. She meets Lace a second time when entering the Citadel. They don't fight, but they share words, and you can see that Lace is starting to realize that Hornet is more than she first appeared to be. Once Hornet gets control of the Citadel, she ascends to the cradle to confront the grandmother. Blocking her way is Lace, in a field of white silk flowers that are totally a Bloodborne reference. They fight again. When Hornet is victorious, Lace reveals to her the truth of her creation. She tells Hornet to go forward, saying bitterly, "After all, it's you that she wants, isn't it?" Hornet goes to face the Grandmother, but she doesn't do it alone. She has been working with 3 other bugs, snail shamans, who have created a trap that will allow Hornet to defeat the Grandmother without having to take her place. Creator and Descendant battle, and in the final moment, Hornet plays her needle in, springing the trap. A circle of void appears, grabbing the Grandmother and dragging her down. The Grandmother grabs Hornet, trying to take her with her, but then Lace appears, cutting Hornet free and stabbing the Grandmother. Together, Lace and the Grandmother are swallowed by the void. The trap causes what the bugs call the Great Breaking, which kills so many of the bugs that Hornet has helped across her journey. The Grandmother, enraged at her defeat and the fate of her daughter, Lace, still is connected with Farloom, allowing the void to reach out and infect the land. Many of the bugs who survive the Great Breaking lose their souls to void corruption. Only a small few escape both the breaking and the void. Enraged, Hornet confronts the snail shamans about the results of their trap, and they're surprised. They tell her she should know full well that the shamans used the power of the void. In the end, they decide to continue to work together to help Farloom. Hornet descends to the deepest part of the land, into the abyss, to investigate. There she looks into a sea of void, and a projection of Lace appears. Lace laughs, again, and says that she is perfectly happy with how things have ended up. She saved Hornet not out of the goodness of her heart, but to get revenge on her mother, to deny the Grandmother the power of Hornet's silk, and she cares little about what happens to Farloom. Let it all come down, she says. But Hornet refuses to let Farloom die, and she has reason for hope. She remembers an Everbloom, a flower from Hollow Nest that had the ability to resist the power of the void. She believes that with the support of the snail shamans, she could retrieve it from her memory. The shamans agree to help, and they perform a spell that sends Hornet into the memories of her past. There, she stands before the White Lady, who expresses regret for the pressures they placed on her. But Hornet doesn't need or want an apology. She has accepted her role as protector and warrior. It is not a burden, it is now a choice. Hornet awakes to find herself holding the Everbloom and the snail shamans gone, their souls spent to anchor her journey. She returns to the abyss, calls out to Lace, asking her to join her in the fight against Grandmother Silk. But Lace appears and tells Hornet that she is no longer herself, she has been consumed by the void. Hornet is undeterred. She plunges into the void and descends, protected by the Everbloom. At the bottom, she finds a weakened Grandmother Silk and a void-corrupted Lace. The sisters battle for the final time. When Hornet is victorious, the void expels Lace's body free of the void's influence. The Grandmother uses her final strength to help her daughters escape the void. But as they rocket to the surface, the power of the Everbloom fades, and the void strikes out. But then, Hornet sees. She has been saved by her half-brother, the Knight. He controls the void now, and under his power he lifts his sister and Lace up to the surface. Once they are there, the void recedes from Farloom. And the story of Hornet and Lace will continue. If you enjoyed this story and want to explore more of Farloom's secrets, check out my video on the history of Farloom. It'll help every encounter in Silksong make a little more sense. In the meantime, thanks for watching.